be so opposed against marine minerals. But then again, from the argumentation they use, I can understand them, but it needs to be fact-based. And if they had all the facts about, for instance, the EMINENT Project at hand, maybe they would have not felt so strongly about it.
Welcome to the Elements of Deep Sea Mining podcast. Anette Brock-Mathisen-Tvedt, thanks for being here. So you are the CEO of Adept Minerals, a deep sea mining startup. Is that how you describe yourself?
I wouldn't say startup anymore, but exploration-led company aiming to acquire licenses. We are in the initiation of that process, so I guess some are still using startup when they speak about us, but I wouldn't say startup per se.
And so then you were also one of the founding members of the team.
Yes.
You've been there from the start. What drove you to start a new deep sea exploration company? What was the gap that you saw and thought you could fill?
I had a very good time in the oil and gas industry, and then came COVID. Made me reflect on what to do. One of my former colleagues came and, this is the short story, but basically came and asked, do you want to explore for minerals instead? And I knew that was something I really wanted to do. Having an interest in the old sea bottoms from my master's and exploration and seeing what value it can create. Something new.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And you signed up to be the CEO right off the bat.
Yeah, the others weren't tough enough, but we agreed that was the natural route. I was in a position to do so, and then of course my co-founders are incredible, and they had been some of them have been thinking of this, have had it in their backbone for since they studied it in early 2000s. So I was fortunate to meet them and take part in this adventure that it is.
So then tell me about Adept. What kind of a company is Adept? Are you guys exploration, technology development, I imagine a mix of a lot of things, and are you a future mining company? These are some of the brainstorming keywords I came up with.
I would say we're exploration focused, but of course with a full value chain mindset. We have looked at over the past years, what are the knowledge gaps? Where do we need to develop things throughout the full value chain? And so even though we've focused on the first step of exploration, which we need to do when we acquire a license, we've also looked into production and processing through our research projects, and we've also developed technology. So our mindset is around the whole value chain.
I guess with the space of just the technology level of the industry, there's so many things you could be doing. There's so many things that need to be done. So is it an issue of having to draw lines and stop yourself from trying to do everything?
That's when we partner up with great partners to ensure we develop it in the right way. The EMINENT Project, maybe discuss in depth in a little bit, but...
let's talk about that now. Okay.
Yeah.
Explain what the EMINENT Project is. This wrapped up at the end of 2025, so you guys are just sharing results. I should maybe say we're here at the Seabed Minerals conference. We've seen a number of presentations on results from the EMINENT Project. So tell everybody what the EMINENT Project is and kind of how it was scoped and what problem it was designed to respond to. Yeah,
so I'll start a little bit before the EMINENT Project. So early on when we founded Adept, we saw we need to understand what is down there. So then we very early recognized that the big drill ships that normally was used in oil and gas and the equipment used for coring, basically knowing what's down there, was not suitable for seabed minerals. So one of the early things we did was to develop FlexiCore, so a coring tool that can take the cores that we need when we're investigating our resource. And then, of course, thinking about how to take that further, we needed to understand the entire value chain of how to explore, what technologies, what methodologies we needed, how to produce these resources, and then how can we process them? Can we process them? And that's when we established EMINENT Project with the aim of demonstrating the entire value chain with the lowest footprint possible. We got some great partners from industry and academic institutions. So along the entire west coast of Norway, the industry partners, international industry partners, and more kind of designated partners got together. And basically what we have done throughout the last 3 years, basically we've demonstrated how to go from rock to pure copper over the past 3 years. And that was beyond what we thought we would be able to do.
This is the rare case of a research project achieving more than its stated goals?
Yeah, that step there that you're holding in your hand now, that is 99% pure copper. We in Adept, we foresaw that we would see the first copper in 2030, but now we see it here in 2026, or this was actually from 2025. Wow. So a significant step.
Wow. The EMINENT Project, I mean, it sounds like it was very ambitious to try to figure out, to put all of the pieces together in the whole value chain of deep sea mining, I guess specific to sulfide resources in the Norwegian extended continental shelf context. I mean, we'll talk about how you've got to pivot now to going international, but if you didn't have to, and if you could continue from the EMINENT Research Project, I wonder what kind of like the next step is. Where would that research project continue to? It
was a sad moment when we had our kind of final seminar of the EMINENT Project. Just a week ahead of that, we had the decision from the budget negotiations in Norway of postponing the first licensing round by 4 years. And that was a huge step back for us and for Norway. And we needed to turn around our strategy based on that. But if that didn't happen, if we did see the first license round this year, we would have been continuing to build upon the EMINENT Project here in Norway through license work and through research projects, and try to mature the knowledge gaps and technology that still needed further development. But now we need to do that elsewhere, which is a pity for Norway.
Yeah, I wanted to understand a little bit better, because presumably, maybe someone might even be listening to this podcast 4 years from now when the process is otherwise and we're restarting in Norway. So I want to stay on what a company in your position would actually do in the Norwegian context. You've got this core sampling technology that you've developed that can take core samples at 4 kilometers deep to try to understand, to map out specific SMS deposits. I assume, I don't know anything about this, I assume that the next steps would be get a license, try to identify, starting out where the most interesting areas even are to start sampling. That's like the first step, I assume, and then get out there and try to go from experimental sampling regime to an actual exploration sampling regime?
Yeah, so from what we would initially do in a license phase is to kind of do regional mapping or license mapping, course mapping, and not necessarily putting coring equipment down there immediately. We would do it stepwise. Course mapping, including both resource kind of directed mapping and environmental mapping in parallel. And then that's the miles, then work with those data and then mature and then take a decision. Should we move further? Where should we move further on? And then go out on another campaign, collecting more data, but more focused around the targets that we have. And still not necessarily coring with FlexiCore, maybe just taking slightly deeper samples than we just surface samples. So there are simpler coring methodologies, and we're currently investigating whether we should develop just a simpler coring methodology for just getting a couple of meters down into the subsurface, get a glimpse. And that is about being like cost efficient when you're kind of still narrowing down your targets. And then when you have your targets, your proper targets or your discoveries, then you would move into more detailed mapping and delineating of potential discoveries. Then you would core more as you get into those and map more.
Yeah.
And a key focus of us is to collect as much data with every time we're out there, but do it with a methodology that is kind of narrowing down with a cost-efficient and natural manner.
Okay, so then let's talk about the decision that was made in December. Do you have insights into why the decision was made? Did you have some notice that this was going to happen? Maybe even start with explaining what happened for people who haven't been completely following the Norwegian political situation, especially since a lot of the listeners here are international listeners who don't understand that Norway has 9 political parties and they have to try to get along in order to get things done.
So back in 2024, the government decided to open up the shelf for mineral exploration or mineral industry. Mm-hmm. But that didn't mean that we could get going. We needed to get the initiation of the first license round. 2024, the budget negotiations within the parties in the parliament, the license round was first postponed to 2025. And then in 2025, December last year, the same kind of discussion during the budget negotiations were happening. And we had a change of parliament in the fall of 25. It was a different structure of parties. And to get the budget through, the large Labour Party not as large anymore, needed support from smaller parties to get their budget through. And during that negotiation, they had a choice of getting it through or needing to leave either oil or gas or seabed minerals. And oil and gas is very important to Norway, so should seabed minerals be. But I don't understand the decision of leaving it out, and I don't understand how they can let the small parties dictate Norway's future. But that was what they did.
Yeah, that's the way the negotiation happened in this country. In order to get a majority, you need to have a coalition, you need to coalesce with other parties. And in this case, it's the same occasionally in Canada. It's never the same in the US. It can give small parties kind of big power on some of their key issues. And for some reason, which I'd be interested if you have any thoughts on why deep sea mining was such a political issue it was the Socialist Left Party and the Green Environmental Party that drove this forward.
Yeah, and red as well. Yeah. I'm not sure what the English
Communist Party. For everyone outside of Norway who'll be surprised that there's a Communist Party forming government. But yeah.
I guess why they are so strongly opposed to this industry, I don't understand from a personal level, but from looking at what is portrayed in the media, I can see that they are opposed to the seabed minerals industry. But when speaking about our project or EMINENT Project, for instance, seeing how far we've come and talking about the alternatives, for me, it's not logical to be so opposed against marine minerals. But then again, from the argumentation they use, I can understand them, but it needs to be fact-based. And if they had all the facts about, for instance, the EMINENT Project at hand, maybe they would have not felt so strongly about it.
Yeah, so you understand the arguments that are being made and are being publicized and how that would cause people to think that deep sea mining is a hill to fight on, but you think that a lot of that argumentation is exaggerated and not that fact-based.
Yeah, it's not based on facts, all the argumentation that I'm met with. Yeah, if they still are opposed, then of course I would like to have a discussion, but if they could at least see the facts and not say that we're going to shovel up the entire seabed of Norway, which was one of the arguments, but rather speak about the areas we're actually trying to map out.
How long have you been working in seabed minerals in Norway?
Since 2020.
Since 2020, so yeah, so 5 years. Has the tone of the conversation changed over that time?
Absolutely. The first couple of years, it was very focused on the environmental aspects around seabed minerals, and it still is. Very much more of the discussion are now also around energy security, resource security, supply and demand, China. So there are a lot of different argumentations around, or the debates around seabed minerals, but it has definitely changed to different aspects.
What has it been like being in such a controversial industry?
It's a challenge, but I love a challenge. It's frustrating to kind of work with fantastic partners on something that, I mean, have really proven up that we can deliver minerals in a very responsible manner, and not being heard. When I'm in a panel and I tell the story about how we got from this to this, and you're still not listened to, then of course it's frustrating, but it's a fantastic industry to work within, develop.
Was this kind of unforeseen when you decided to pivot from the oil and gas industry to the seabed minerals industry, and you saw that there was going to be, the technological and regulatory and all these other challenges of kind of building an industry from scratch? Had you also expected that there would be this sort of PR battle that...
Not to the extent that we've seen, not at all. I thought we would work more on kind of the development of the industry, and I didn't expect me to be so politically engaged as I've been, or so much debates that there has been. I didn't anticipate that. Now, I didn't really think 10 years back that I would ever meet any politicians, but now I've met most in Norway and tried to tell what we're doing and with the seabed minerals.
I often wonder, I mean, I came into this space just a few years ago and noticed it's so controversial and polarized, and I personally feel like that polarization is just unhelpful. It'd be nicer if everybody was more able to listen to one another. If when you give a presentation on getting from a rock to a copper nugget, they listen, and when they give a presentation on what they're afraid of, that they feel listened to. And this is one of the things that I think I experienced a lot when I first entered into this conversation and started talking to people. You feel frustrated by the tone of the conversation, and so do the people on the other side. And I sort of wonder whose responsibility, or if you would have done things differently, if you had gone back 5 years ago, if you could have somehow made the conversation more constructive. How do you feel about having to have that responsibility in addition to running a company?
I've always asked for, like, instead of yes-no debates, like, should we do deep sea mining or not? I would say, like, how should we do deep sea mining? How should we best, if we're moving ahead, then we should try to rather discuss the challenges that people would like to see solved along the way. So I've asked for that several times, and it's not always heard, but we've had some good discussions as well, but more in closed rooms than in the open panels. I guess behind closed doors, it's easier to have that more open dialogue than in front of 200 people. Then the panel moderator wants to have some fire up.
I mean, people for some reason think that a debate is the right format to have a deep sea mining conversation. I hosted a debate online a few months ago, and after the debate, then I had the same two people on for a conversation afterwards. And I don't think I'm ever going to do another debate because I think the conversation was so much more interesting. I don't think I learned anything in the debate because I'd heard everybody kind of makes their points and they're not really listening. They're trying to...
I appreciate kind of like this topic of kind of why is it as it is. I would appreciate if we did more of the kind of meetings where, okay, I have this challenge of dewatering plume, for instance. I've heard that several times. That this is a big challenge. But then in the EMINENT project, we took that with us, and there we've developed a closed loop system, filtering units. We've developed lots of technology to avoid that dewatering plume as much as we can. And now with the closed system, it's very limited of what will get out of the system that we're not producing, which is one of the things that we've listened to. Then there is the light pollution issue. We've listened to that as well. We're planning to, during our production phase, do we need light? No, we know where we are. So can we live without light? Mm-hmm. Yes. The sound system, we heard today at the conference, there are systems that keep the pumps on deck of the ship, but not in the water column. So there's a lot of technology developers that are listening, but it's not necessarily communicated to the entire community that they're doing so. Every time I get a challenge like that, I ask the engineers we're working with, can this be solved? Yes, how much money do you have? Yeah. And everything can be solved, more or less. But of course, all mining will have an impact, regardless whether on land or at sea. But we need to do what we can in the regions we are working in.
What about the messaging from the Norwegian government? I've heard a number of people from different positions say, specifically there was confusion between the words activity, exploration, and exploitation in the rollout of the way that the Norwegian government kind of talked about deep sea mining. I had it put to me that if they had been more clear about, what we're doing is exploration first, and exploitation is a separate step that comes later, rather than this word activity, which I've heard also people in the resistance movement say, no, if you look at page 70-something of the white paper from the government, they are specific that activity means exploration and exploitation. There was room for confusion in this. And I wonder, if you think the messaging there has caused some of the...
In hindsight, they could have been, of course, more clear on the stepwise, but even our prime minister did go out very clearly and say this is a stepwise process. Mm-hmm. But to explain that stepwise process, of course, everyone could have been better on it, hearing the decision, because basically in Norway, the stepwise process that is within the seabed mineral law and the regulatory framework is basically the same as you see in the international kind of high seas ISA licenses. We're first doing exploration, then we're considering whether we are moving ahead, developing the asset. Then we have to give a full impact assessment of that project to the government, to the parliament that they need to approve. Yeah. And then we can get going with potential production. So it's basically the same as is happening elsewhere in the world, but it's just the wording that is different. Because if we were awarded a license in the first license round this year, it would be called production license, even though the first 3 to 5 to 6 or 7 years would be exploration phase. Yeah. So the wording and messaging of the stepwise process could maybe have been better.
Is the reason that it had to be called a production license in order that you, who has put a bunch of resources into getting a production license, has some assurance that if you do want to go past the exploration phase, that you will get rights to do the next step? This is also something that I've kind of heard said, is that in order to incentivize the investors into the industry, you need to give them some assurance that there's going to be, a carrot at the end of the process. And that wording was scoped around getting all of that in.
Yeah, I guess. And we were building this upon 60 years of oil and gas development here in Norway and rules and regulations. So everyone kind of knows the process. Right. But yes, you're right. It's kind of like you're not given the right to produce, but you're given kind of the opportunity to be able to get to that step with that license. Yeah. It wouldn't really change anything if they just so first step, 5 years, exploration phase. Call it exploration license at the time. And then when you have been giving the approval of your impact assessment and are going with your production, then you can call it the production license, just to for people to understand what phase you're in. But since you're calling it production license from day one, it's a bit of a challenge for people to understand what you're actually doing.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there's people the people who are still working at this in Norway are going to recognize this and try to change the language and address some of the simple miscommunication things that hopefully make the process cleaner if it starts again in 2029. I guess I want to hear from you. So given that process in Norway is on pause for the rest of the current government, which is until 2029, unless anything changes. So what does Adept do now?
If we want to work with this industry, we need to turn around, or it was a Kodak moment, you can say. Not that we didn't think about international opportunities before, but it made it a more reasonable pathway to follow up on. So now we're seeing internationally, we've always looked on a global scale at the opportunities, but we thought Norway had the most stable regulatory framework. Didn't. So now we're looking internationally, looking at early movers of countries, like within their EECs, and more mature EECs. We all see development in the US, we see development in Japan, quite significant of development there, Cook Islands, and we have countries, other countries that are developing their resources or exploring their resources. So we're trying to be open, although we are looking to countries where we see what we think is a stable regulatory framework.
Interesting. And are you specifically staying within sulfides?
We're focused on sulfides, but we're play agnostic, I would say. So, but we're focused on sulfides. That's our expertise has been built around sulfides, but we also have expertise within other play or other resource types. But I believe we're one of the best explorers in the world on sulfides as of now. But we need to prove it, getting our licenses.
And then, like when you look international, is the geologic formations, like if you start thinking about Japan, is it just a completely different situation geologically than Norway? And does that matter? I imagine that everywhere in the world is significantly different from everywhere else, that, the Rocky Mountains are different than the Alps. And when you do go underwater, you have the same situation, that everything is unique. So are you looking for things that are like similar to what you've experienced in the Norwegian situation, or is that less important?
It is important in many ways, because this rock here, it contains quite a bit of copper, for instance, which making it a very interesting resource, a valuable resource to further work with. And sulfides around the globe, they are similar in how they are formed, but they may contain different types of mineralogy, and that is dependent on very many factors. One being how fast the spreading ridges are moving apart, how hot is it down there. There are so many elements that can change the composition of a sulfide, but they are more or less the same around the globe. The nodules, they have different content as well. The Cook Islands nodules, they have more cobalt compared to the Clipperton zone, but we can still look for the different clay types, even though they are containing different amounts of the metals. But of course, it wouldn't hurt to find a sulfide as rich in copper as this one here. But we believe that we can find that elsewhere in the world as well.
And that's the main thing is essentially the high grades and the economic picture of, or ties down to the ore grades.
Ore grades and size, of course. It's you can find very high grades in small areas, but you need to find the areas that contains enough for it to make it economically viable. Of course, for instance, for crust, you would prefer the crust to be thicker rather than thinner, because you will find more of the elements that you're after.
Have you heard any move in the Norwegian Parliament had any repercussions internationally? Like, do the way that the rest of the world is looking at Norway, is talking about Norway? I wonder if the global deep sea mining conversation has reacted to this kind of seemingly abrupt about-face, or if this is a domestic issue and the rest of the world is moving on.
Oh, within the marine minerals community, it's definitely heard all over. People were looking to Norway for kind of the rules and regulations. How will Norway do it? They were seeing how Norway was developing or frameworks, how the Norwegian Offshore Directorate has been mapping, and now that has all been not full stop, but almost full stop. And people are quite surprised, and I guess they were hoping that Norway would lead on as a exceptional, I'm biased, but exceptional offshore country that we are. Like we tend to do things very thoroughly, very responsibly, and now others need to ensure that we need to rely on other countries to develop the same reliable, sound regulatory frameworks and stable environment to develop the most responsible minerals we can. Other countries are developing very well and have strong drive toward driving the industry in a sound and a responsible manner.
Let me ask you about my trade-offs question. So I got into deep sea mining because I work at Sintef Ocean, and so had worked on minerals before. So I started looking into deep sea mining, and I went to some of the meetings and conferences and noticed so much discussion of the ethical questions. And so then I decided to look at how ethicists could help the deep sea mining conversation become a little bit more practical, positive, constructive. I found ethicists aren't so interested in dealing with complex trade-off situations where you have to balance a bunch of different values, a bunch of different interests, a bunch of different costs and benefits. Surprisingly, I would have thought this is one of the main things that you would need an ethicist to assist with when you have people who are arguing economics on one side and environmental protection on another side, and someone else is saying, yeah, but what about human impact? And so what I'm doing now is I'm asking everybody who I talk to, how do you think we should make decisions when we have to balance between all of these different competing interests? So first of all, do you see that this is one of the main issues, one of the main discussion topics when it comes to deep sea mining, is there's these conflicting interests, and then how do you make trade-offs when there are?
I see that people do have conflicting interests, but for me, we need the most responsible minerals. We're currently getting our minerals from somewhere we don't want to know about where we're getting it from, and we're not getting enough from recycling. So we need to develop responsible value chains for sourcing. And for me, Norwegian seabed minerals, they are creating value, creating security, and they are one of the lowest, most footprinted minerals or metals we can get if we develop this resource here. So I don't have a conflict of working with seabed minerals because I truly believe that we're developing the most responsible resource.
Yeah, so you feel like when you put all of the different values onto the scorecard, there's kind of green lights in each column.
Yes.
I guess for
me, it's green light ahead. All the kind of discoveries or the research and work we've done over the years have proven like we can develop technology, we can develop it faster. We're investigating our sea bottom. We see the environmental aspects that we need to ensure we take care of, and we're doing so. We're seeing much more metals in this rock, or a rock always contains metals, but of valuables in this rock than I anticipated, or we anticipated.
Is that right? This is when the science comes in on the grades and the size of the resources. It's exceeding even your original expectations? Yes.
And we saw the Norwegian Offshore Directorate did a resource assessment back in 2023. Now they're going to come with a new one. And I hear, or I'm not sure, they are doing a sound work, but from the recent discoveries and research that has been done out on the Norwegian shelf, it's going to be much higher than we saw back in 2023. And then, of course, we're developed the entire value chain by now in Norway, and I didn't anticipate us getting this far. And all the kind of positives are adding up. I've asked for red flags, and I haven't really received a red flag that someone can really say that I would turn down this industry. I wouldn't have worked with this if it wasn't for the fact that I believe this is the most promising and responsible way of doing mining today.
What about, not that I'm proposing this as a red flag, but just on the subject of the full value chain. So you in the EMINENT project, you guys managed to, all within Norway, manage to process from ore to finished product. But when you scale that up, what do you imagine is the realistic kind of value chain for sulfides? It's tough I want to keep asking you about in the Norwegian context. If you got ores up onto a boat in the North Sea, where's a reasonable place to take them? Or is it in the picture to build out the value chain somehow in Europe?
So for me, it's we've been looking into sites where we would have processing facilities in Norway, because even though I can bring this ore to Sweden or Finland and produce copper, it's not, that facility is not built for that high ore grade of copper, for instance. Do they have room for all that? That rock that is coming in is another question. So we've investigated sites for developing processing facilities along the coast of Norway. And there are several reasons for that, of both for kind of like being near the resource. The energy that is needed is cleaner. And of course, it secures our supply chain, and it develops a lot of workplaces along the coast of Norway, which is a benefit for Norwegian development.
Yeah, that's interesting. Having lived in Norway now for a little while, I have seen a few cases of these communities are quite eager to try to get behind the next. I remember when battery factories were the next big thing, and everyone was trying to compete for where the next gigafactory was going to be built in Norway. And so I could imagine that you would get local support for that sort of. But it's interesting that in your mind it was to build out a processing facility locally.
Yeah, we're talking so much about securing our own supply. Like if we can develop it in Norway or Europe, that would be of benefit. And building a new processing facility, for instance, for this ore here, it would mean that we can potentially also not skip steps because we want to skip them, but skip steps because they're unnecessary with a high ore grade. So making it much more efficient.
What's the step you can skip with?
So we have had a trial. We would have continued with that trial, but basically one of the trials we did with this type of rock was to just crush it very simply and put it straight into the smelter. That was one thing we did. So then, and that worked, but we needed to go to the step 2 of that process, piloting it, and that is, of course, one thing we've seen. And then another thing we've seen is that we've investigated bioleaching in the EMINENT project. Very promising results, changing how we process minerals quite significantly, and especially these. So that will simplify the whole processing part of the value chain quite significantly. I would really recommend to invite Sabina to your podcast from University of Tromsø. She's working on bioleaching and has some very promising results that she presented in Bergen and in the EMINENT summit. So kind of the easy story of it is that if we can potentially produce copper water or water containing the metals we want, rather than producing rocks to surface, which would revolutionize how we do seabed mineral. Okay.
Well, we'll talk to Sabina about this.
Yeah, you should.
Is there anything else that you would like to touch on if you've got...
I think I've touched upon most that I wanted to say. I really appreciate being here. We'll talk about the great work that has been performed by our partners and ourselves in Adept and EMINENT has been a pleasure.
Where do you send people for information both about Adept and about EMINENT? What do people Google to find out more?
So EMINENT Project is just about finished. We reported a couple of weeks ago, sent in our final report, and the publications are hopefully starting to come out. Some are out already, but we'll try to gather them in a list, some on the eminent-project.com website. that's on my table when they come out. And then, of course, we're open, we're present, try to be present where seabed minerals are discussed, and our website is adept.com. So you can visit that. We'll try to be more updated on that in the years to come.
Okay. Well, thanks for being here.
Thank you.